Gatekeeper 419. Gatekeeper 419 felt odd as he watched the ocean churn before him. The waves crested before smashing against the hard, dark rocks that formed the berm wall. His posture stiffened as he tried to figure out what was causing his unease. You didn't become a gatekeeper if you couldn't spot problematic people. This was one thing that he prided himself on, for he was the second best spotter in all the city. There were 10 main gates, along with 6 other not well-known gates to enter the city. He was one of only 2 gatekeepers posted at the main gates. He and Gatekeeper 372, Gerald, as he was known off-duty, were placed at the front gates. Gerald had been recently promoted for stopping an illegal import of grass carp. If you asked him, the promotion was not deserved. Anyone with a nose could have found that shipment. Though he did like Gerald, he was kind, and it did help that he was married to his niece. Gerald was lucky it was one of Gatekeeper 419's favorite nieces. He swiveled his head, looking for oddly shaped wagons or suspicious bulging cloaks. When his investigation turned up nothing but the usual riffraff that slowly meandered in and out of the city, looking like an oddly colored snake, he let out a sigh and was about to dismiss the feeling, though to do so would be negligent. So he reaffirmed his determination to find the source. Stepping away from the wall, he began to walk through the crowd. He rested his hand on the hilt of his sword, ready to draw it at any second. Gerald must have seen him enter the crowd, because moments later, Gatekeeper 419 was soon joined by the younger, less experienced man. "Did you see something?" Gerald hissed as they continued to draw stares from many of the people seeking entry into the city. "I have a feeling that something bad is trying to get in," he stated flatly. "You left because of a feeling? We're not supposed to leave our posts unless we see or smell something suspicious." The younger gatekeeper was right, of course, but that didn't stop Gatekeeper 419 from retorting. "Gerald, when you've been a gatekeeper as long as I have, you begin to trust your gut feelings." "Hey, keep it quiet. It's Gatekeeper 372 while we're on duty. Or do you want me to start calling you Tom?" He sucked in a sharp breath. That was the last thing he wanted. He shook his head and picked up the pace, heading towards the large wagons 15 paces down the line. Gerald followed on his heels. The dark, foreboding sense increased as they neared the first cart. Something was amiss. The man that sat guiding the team of horses towards the city unnerved him. There was something wrong with his eyes. "Halt! Step down and prepare your wagon for inspection," Gatekeeper 419 stated. The man hesitated for a moment, then bowed his head egregiously. "Of course," he said in a deep, scratchy voice. He tied his reins and climbed down the small step-ladder. The man stood with his hands clasped behind his back. "State your name and business," 419 continued, while sliding the tip of his sword under the canvas concealing the cart behind. "I've gone by many names, but you can call me Orton. My business is my own." 419 raised an eyebrow in response, while lifting the canvas further. "I'm afraid there's no private business allowed within city walls. You better take your goods elsewhere." The darkly dressed man gritted his teeth in response. "If you must know, I'm running away to be married to a girl within these walls," he said coldly. 419 could tell the man was lying. If there was something he hated more than anything, it was getting lied to. He was about to turn and tell the man he would have to run away and be married elsewhere, when his eye glimpsed a large leather-bound book. There was something familiar about it, with its coarse cover and hand-stretched leather barely fitting the pages within. There was no way it could be what he thought it to be. "Find something," came the response from Gerald. "Where did you get this book?" Gatekeeper 419 asked, well holding the book out towards the lying man. "Oh, that old thing. Found it washed up near the marshlands. I'll let you have it, if you grant me safe passage into your city." Gerald pulled him aside. "I didn't find anything out of the ordinary. He doesn't even have any weapons. Just let him through, and keep your old book." He sighed, then nodded in agreement. "Fine. I'll take the book in exchange for your safe passage into the city." The man smiled. It sent a chill through Gatekeeper 419's body. "Nice doing business with you," he said before clambering back up the ladder and moving his cart forward. Gatekeeper 419 made his way back to his post, and once the man and his cart were through, the unease he felt dissipated, and he found that he could relax once again. When he was relieved that evening by Gatekeeper 653, he let out an exasperated breath before heading towards the barracks. It took a few moments to store his gear and pull on his soft leather boots. When he finished, he stared at the book that lay near him, wondering what had come over him to trade passage for such an ugly thing. He knew he'd seen it before, but he couldn't figure out where. The tight passageways leading back to his rambling multi-family dwelling, with one half laying in rubble-strewn heap, felt oddly empty. The cobble smelled a little too clean. He knew the cleaners gave up about halfway to the Stacks. The Stacks was a place on the western side of the city, where most of the middle-class, hard-working folk like himself lived. It was always messy and unkempt. The thick layer of filth that coated the walls now sprouted small pink flowers and tumbling vines that coiled and wound to the street below. Springtime was his favorite season, for it was the time he could forget about just how dirty it actually was. Children usually dotted every free square inch of the place until the moon drifted high into the sky and mothers, fearing what lurks in the shadows, called their youngsters home. He smiled at the thought, remembering his own youth in the port. It was far more dangerous to live outside the city walls, but as a youth he hadn't understood that. He rounded the last bend and entered the courtyard. The lanterns hung in the windows, casting a yellowish hue on the scenery. Taking a deep breath, Gatekeeper 419, or now referred to as Tom, since he was off duty, strode up to the door and swung it open. 3 very unruly boys raced towards him, their auburn curly hair bobbing wildly as they ran with everything they had. "Father, father, you're home!" they exclaimed. Laughing, he grabbed all 3 in one large bear hug and swung them around. "Ah, my brave little soldiers. Protected your mother today, did you?" he asked. Aiden, his eldest at 5, nodded in response. The twins Bradley and Cooper smiled, each 2 years younger than Aiden. "Good. Someone's got to keep an eye out for those foul rats for me while I'm at work." "All right, boys. It's far past time for you to be up. Come on, Tom. Help me get the children to bed." "Sarah, it's so good to see you. I got something I want you to take a look at." "Can't it wait until the children are in bed?" she asked, somewhat forcefully. Her eyes conveyed the message that if he pressed the issue, he would be sent back out the door to sleep at the barracks. He gave her his most genuine smile, then nodded. "Of course, my dear. Boys, come on, let's get going," he barked while setting the old book down near the hearth, where, unbeknownst to him, wriggled ever so slightly. Tom removed his cap and chased the 3 boys up the rickety set of stairs. Once gone, Bertram flitted his pages in the efforts to shake any last remnants of dark magic from himself. Then he scuttled a bit further away from the fire as he watched 2 of the coals tumble out onto the floor next to him. It would be unfortunate to have only just been rescued from that wretched man, only to burn by the likes of an unkempt fire. The book didn't know why the gatekeeper had taken him, but he sure was happy about it, though there was something familiar about him, perhaps One of the visions Marjorie had was about this man. Once Bertram felt safe and warm, he closed his eyes, or at least he would have closed them if he had any. Bertram wasn't really sure how he could see. One thing he was grateful for was not being able to smell. He had seen so many things that looked like they smelled awful. Things such as the dark, black, sticky mud on the banks of the marsh, or the dreadful rats that looked like dirty tufts of coughed-up fur rather than animals. He shuddered at the thought. He smiled to himself as he dozed off in the cozy cottage, trying to forget about the dreadful things that had taken place in the last few days. Tom kissed Aiden on the forehead before tiptoeing back away from the bed. He took Sarah's outstretched hand, and together they descended the stairs. She let out a long sigh as she sat down on her rocker opposite the front door. The old wooden timbers creaked softly beneath her as the chair methodically moved back and forth. Tom smiled. Seeing his wife made him happy, even if her hair stuck out at odd angles and the bags under her eyes were very visible. She was a wonderful mother, and he loved that about her. That didn't mean she didn't get worn out every so often. He found himself bare-knuckle tired when he had to watch the boys for a week while Sarah went to visit her sister in the country each year. Pride swelled in his chest as he just admired his wife. She looked up and met his eyes, a smile forming on the edges of her lips. "What are you thinking about, Tom Malek? It better be nice things," she said playfully. His cheeks flushed, and he glanced down towards his boots. "Oh, you know, I've never thought one bad thing about you. Just thinking about how wonderful you are," he responded honestly. She narrowed her eyes and pursed her lips. "Not one bad thought about me, even when I nearly burned your mother's cinnamon bread last Christmas." "Nah, never. I thought it tasted better with a little bit of char anyway." She laughed. "What, have you had bad thoughts about me?" Tom pondered. Sarah's face softened, and she spoke almost in a whisper. "No. I married the best man the city had to offer." Tom walked over to her, then leaned in and kissed his wife. Their lips parted, and she stared into his eyes with nothing but love. "What was it you wanted me to look at?" she asked, breaking the silence. Tom's face flickered with recollection as he looked over to where the book rested on the floor next to the hearth. His expression changed to one of confusion. Hadn't he placed the book on the other side of the hearth? He thought to himself. He shook his head and moved over, picking up the strangely familiar book. He stood and handed it to his wife, who blinked with wide eyes, surprise and shock registering at once. "Where did you get this?" she asked with shaking hands. "I traded entry into the city from a strange man. Why?" "Because this was my mother's. Isn't that right, Bertram?" she said, shaking the book. Bertram snapped awake and immediately felt sick as he found himself shaking quite violently. Had that evil man come back and taken him? He thought, as dread settled in the pit of his stomach. When the shaking subsided, he found himself looking up at a person he thought never to see again. "Sarah, is that you, my dear?" Bertram asked. "Yes, it's me, you old book. What happened to my mother?" she demanded, her golden eyes flaring with anger. Gatekeeper 419 finally remembered where he had seen the book. The day after he and Sarah had been married, the newly wedded couple had taken a riverboat out to the island where Marjorie had taken up residency. The thought of the small, cramped, and stinky cottage brought a frown to his lips. They had spent the night there, and the cottage was simply too small for a man of his stature. Tom had slept with his feet out the front door all night long as the crescendo of animal activity sounded from outside. He'd feared they would find his feet a tasty snack. The memory made him shudder, and he hoped that somehow finding the book wouldn't lead to a second night at the strange cottage. The book somehow became thinner as Tom watched it deflate. In a gravelly tone, laced with sorrowful notes of mourning and loss, he began his tale. The more the book spoke, the grimmer Tom became. His stomach knotted as he reflected on his decision to let that man enter the city. He had to warn the guards. But if what Bertram had told him was true, the man wasn't looking to harm the king or anyone remotely important. Besides, wasn't Sarah's father deceased? So, my mother, she's gone? Sarah asked as hot tears rolled down her cheeks and onto Bertram. I do not believe she is still with us. However, I did not witness her end, as I was so horribly taken from her. The confirmation was enough to send Sarah into yet another bout of moaning. Sarah, I'll take a boat out tomorrow and, He swallowed, then continued, and if I find that she is dead, then I'll give her a proper burial. She doesn't deserve to be left for animals to find, he said in his most comforting tone, while resting his hand on hers. She nodded slowly, while wiping away the tears that stained her face. Thank you, Tom. I'd appreciate that. The remainder of the night, Tom stared up at the ceiling and tried to figure out what to do. He knew he needed to find the man and get him out of the city, but he also knew he needed to lay Sarah's mother to rest. Eventually, the sun peeked up through the window, and before the boys were up, Tom pulled on his boots and placed his hat on his head. Then he was off. He didn't waste a second, even to stop for a bite to eat, as he made his way to the barracks. When he arrived, the captain of the guard was still fumbling with his keys to unlock the office. Ah, Tom, what are you doing here so early? The man said, jumping at Tom's sudden appearance. Sir, I'm here to request leave time. The portly man regarded him with one eyebrow raised. You? Tom Mellick? You haven't taken a day off in 7 years. Why now? My wife and I found out her mother passed yesterday. I need to go and pay my respects. Didn't your own mother pass just last year, and didn't you refuse to attend her burial? Tom bit his lip. He had indeed done that. However, that was for a different reason entirely. His mother hadn't actually died, just somebody who went by the same name. He'd never corrected the captain's assumptions. By not attending his not-mother's funeral, he thought it had helped him earn his promotion. This is, different, sir. I promise I'll work a double shift to make up for the lost time. The captain's face softened. Then he placed a hand on Tom's shoulder. Tom, you've been one of the best gatekeepers I've ever known. If you say you have to go, then go. Thank you, sir. The gruff man nodded in response. Then Tom strode purposefully out of the barracks and onto the port. Once there, he paid an old fisherman to take him into the marshes to find Sarah's mother. As the night began to fall, and the sun lit the horizon with a blinding fire red, Tom turned to face the city, and couldn't help but feel the dark, ominous magic that hung over the castle like billowing thunderclouds. Sighing, he sent a prayer for his wife and children towards the burning heavens.